Just to give you an idea of the design, it's not much of a design, simply repeating trios and knowing what species we're going to put in here. So this is going to be pears, plums, apples, and a nitrogen fixer or 2 nitrogen fixers. I think we'll mostly go with honey locust because we don't have to deal with thorns, and that's a thorny issue in itself. So this area is 6 rows here mulched. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 rows. If we lay it out this way, that's the north end. So this north end, we actually have it kind of planted like this with nuts. So we've got our nut field at the very back on the north end. And then the spacing here. Now listen to me about spacing. Don't copy what I'm doing because it may not be your situation. We're starting on a very sandy site. Very sandy as in not very rich, not very fertile. But when we use seedlings, we can expect them to be quite a bit more vigorous than like we've planted the rest of the orchard as dwarf rootstock. So partly because our infrastructure here is, so we have pipes here. So a pipe here, and then we'll have a pipe back there coming out of the ground. So our irrigation infrastructure is already in place at multiples of 12 feet, or every 12 feet actually. So I could go with 12 feet spacing, 24-foot spacing, or 36-foot spacing. I could modify that and drill new holes in the main line. Which one do I do? I have seen examples where the trees, the apple trees anyway, have rooted on their own root. And where we have every second row, it works quite well. So it's not all that scientific. And I may do a video in 10 years saying, wow, I should have planted far further. Maybe. But from what I've seen on this property, on these soils, planting it at double rows or every 24 feet, which is what I'm going to use here. So this is going to be 24 feet between rows. And so that's between rows, and we're going to go with almost that, or 21 feet, 7 meters between trees. So 21 feet by 24 feet. How do I arrive at that? Just observing how trees react on this place, and I think it will work. I always have the saying that when in doubt, space them out. And so, am I too far apart? For some, I'm pretty sure that for plums, this is going to be way more than is needed. And that's all right, because having lots of air around the tree is a good thing. We could always fill up, and the intention here is to put trees with an understory of a double hedge. So a double fruiting hedge, things like red currant, black currant, gooseberry, raspberry. So we'll put 2 hedges underneath, and that will be the grass control. With double hedge, the space in between the 2 hedges will be shaded out and shouldn't eventually be anything. So just to give you an idea of how that looks, so we'll have our tree row, and then we'll have 1 shrub, 2 shrub, all down the row. So if you look in perspective, that's what it will be. So we'll have a hedge here, And these will be complete hedges. There won't be gaps in between. So that's a quick of what it will look like. And if we do this as a plan view, you'll have individual trees, hopefully not touching. And then we'll have under that a continuous hedge. So that's basically what we're looking to get down the road. Not a whole lot of emphasis on perennials because this won't be an area where we're gonna really put a lot of effort in mulching or keeping down the grass other than getting it started. So the first 3 or 4 years we will. And after that, I would really like the hedge to do the job and not have to continue to interact on it. So that's the idea. In species, we're gonna focus mostly plums and pears. And so I know that here, this one row, since it's already started, so this row is started with apples. So this row we'll do apple pear because they have a similar water need. And plums, actually plums would go better with cherries, but I don't really have any cherry trees. I have some cherry shrubs, but no cherry trees to put in. So we'll put cherry, plum and pears in the other row, simply because out of those three, out of apple, pear and plums, we have more than enough apple already. We don't have enough plums and pears. So if this block here, which is about 1.5 acres, is filled with plums, mostly plums and pears, that should go a long way towards balancing the supply of plum, pear, and apple. So since this one is apple, this row, we will be doing trios. So what was a trio? If you didn't know, go see the trio video. If you don't know what else is going on here, I'd say go see the virtual tour. That will give you a great look historically, the concepts we use. If you want to see something a little older, but also summarizing all the main ideas, go see the film, The Permaculture Orchard Beyond Organic. With those three, you'll really understand why are we not planting just apple trees like everybody else does. Well, no, we don't do that. Go see Flee the Monoculture, because this was a monoculture. It was all apple trees. It was 4,000 apple trees organic. When we started, actually we converted from conventional to organic. Oh, you hear that? The goose convention taking off there. It's time for them to go out to feed in the fields. They're having a honking good time. Maybe they're going to a honky-tonk. So what's a trio? 2 fruit trees and a nitrogen fixer, or a fruit and nut and a nitrogen fixer. We could have put more nuts in here too. We started there, over there, so maybe we'll continue over there with hazelnuts. So what did I say? We'll do apple, pear, nitrogen fixer. And these rows are 480 feet, which is about 155 meters. 155 meters, so divide that into 3. So it's about 50. No, it's not 50. Divide that into our 7 meters, 150 times 7, 7 times 70. No. How much is that? Gotta do the math. Jeez. Yeah, it works out to about 20 trees per row. 7 meters, 20, it's 140 meters. And I'm not sure the end is 10 meters. That's 150. So 140, 150, about that. So 20 trees in a row. 20 trees, let's say we got to 21. we would have 7 trios. So here's one unit, one trio unit. So we'll just repeat that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll do 7 trios like that. Apple, pear, nitrogen. You say that doesn't work out to nap. That's good. I don't want it to be nap anymore. Have you been napping? I want it to be a trio, because it's not just nitrogen apple pear or nitrogen apple plum. For you it could be, I don't know, a nitrogen fixer mango banana clump. So that would give you, what would it, an MBA, something like that. So don't be too stuck with NAP. That was the original block, and we've since moved on to trios. So as long as it's 3, APN, apple, pear, nitrogen, so that I'll put PE because it's pear and not PL as in plum. And then we'll do again. Nitrogen. How do you like that? We're designing on the fly, right in the field. None of this, oh, I thought about it for 5 years, what I'm going to do, the perfect combination. No, I thought about it this morning. I'm planting a seeded orchard that designing on the fly. So you don't have to, some people want it so perfect that they never start. Go see Just Start, please. Because if you're making excuses for why you can't start because I might not have the perfect spacing and the perfect trio, you'll never get started. Just get some seeds in the ground. Just get some trees in the ground. Just get some plants in the ground. It's not more complicated than that. Get it? It really isn't. APN, APN, APN. There we go. So that's the design of our first row. Apple, pear, nitrogen fixer. Now, that's an important detail. This is the south end of the orchard, and this is the north end of the orchard. So you see, that's why I'm putting the big trees here, the nut trees, because there is a little bit of method to the madness. And putting the big trees on the north side, what does that mean? It means they won't be shading the orchard. You see, the sun's coming from here, not from here. So we could put the biggest trees here. The other thing is the biggest trees in this combination right now, if I put honey locust or black locust, will be the nitrogen fixers. They'll be the biggest trees if they're not pruned, and they're going to have to be pruned. So we tested it this morning. We know that if we put at a 7-meter spacing and we have a nitrogen fixer here and we put staggered. So here our next trio in the next series. You see, here's a next series. We know that if the nitrogen is here on the 3rd tree, we'll have to put the nitrogen here on the 2nd series. You see, we stagger our nitrogen fixers. Get it? It's diagonal. And why? Because it happens to be that from here to here is actually our due south. So that staggered row like this gives us, it's kind of skewed because they're not that far apart and they're much wider apart, but that gives us a line that's north-south. And that north-south is really important because by having the biggest trees north-south, they create the least shade on the other 2 trees, the tree on each side of the nitrogen fixers. So if the nitrogen is the 2nd, what goes first? Pear, you got it. Or I could put plum because I'm not putting apple in this trio. So what are we putting here? We're going to put pear and plum. So you know what? We're using pear nitrogen. And that is a little detail too. Apple, pear, nitrogen. The biggest of those the biggest tree in that trio will be nitrogen fixer. The second biggest or tallest will be pear. And the third tallest will be apple. So if we do that, we kind of have a little bit of a cascading effect. So the trios will actually kind of go like this. So you'll have your apple here, pear here, and nitrogen fixer the tallest. So nitrogen, pear, apple, nitrogen, pear, apple. They'll kind of zigzag back and forth, up and down. Maybe, but usually they would. If they grow to full size, that's kind of what they will do. So that's all right. We'll have those three. So this one, the first, we'll put as a pear, nitrogen, and then this one will be PL or plum. So that's our trio in the next row. Pear, nitrogen, plum. And what do we repeat here? That's the easy part. All you have to figure out is your first trio. You might have a second combo trio, that's okay. You might even have a third combo trio. But if you're doing rows, the simplest is keep repeating your pattern. Permaculture is all about patterns. And we're doing a pattern of trios. And in this row, we're doing a pattern of, well, now let me do the next one. So that'll be plum. What's the next one? Pear. Nitrogen. Plum. Or I could say our combination here is plum, pear, nitrogen. Plum, pear, nitrogen. Just staggered. Okay? Got that? So that will be PE, nitrogen, PL. PE, nitrogen, PL. I hope this makes you feel a little more comfortable with design. Look, this isn't to scale. Look, it's just a line and a few circles. Please, I got a master's in landscape architecture. I know what it's about, doing detailed plans, measured. Look, I've done that. And I know that the essence of a good design is the thinking behind it. It's not how fancy the drawing is. I've seen fancy drawings, but if you question the details of it, you realize, you know what? It's not necessarily common sense. So make sure you have the common sense on there, and the rest follows. So we'll continue these, and I'll show you next. Sebastian and Alice are back with our marking stakes. I'll show you how we do the setup, and stay tuned to see a design layout on the fly of a seeded permaculture orchard. Here's my color code. If I forget, I know it's on the video. We also figured out how many trees we're going to put in here. So because we have how many? 7 trios spaced 7 meters apart. So do the math. So that's 21 trees in a row times 7 meters. It's 147 meters. And the rows are about 155, but we got 10 meters at the end. So we know we'll pretty well fit 7 trios. 6 rows. This one is the only one with apple, the second row. So we know in here we could probably only fit 5 apple trees. We'll fit 7 pear trees likely, and 7 nitrogen fixers. So here's our total. Based on plums, 35, 42 pear trees, 5 apple trees, and 42 nitrogen fixers. That's our whole 1.5 acres. What's that total? 42, 90, 80, 84, 87, 112 trees in an acre and a half. Not a whole lot, but they're going to be spaced and they'll be full sized. When in doubt, space them out. So now that they've got it measured, every 7 meters we'll put on the mark, we'll put a stake. That's the second step. had a little confusion. I thought I had to draw it up. Can you imagine? I had to draw up the plan to see how does this work, because I couldn't figure out why, if the first one was a nitrogen, normally the pattern is nitrogen in the trio, so 1, 2, 3, 1. But when I went to put the nitrogen 2 rows over, or when I went to put the label 2 rows over, couldn't figure why would it be nitrogen again. Well, because we staggered. See, they're not straight in line at the end, they're actually staggered. So this way we get a diagonal of the trio. So we get nitrogen, pear, plum, nitrogen, pear, plum. And that works that way. But because we're staggered, it works. But then we get nitrogen, pear, plum, nitrogen, and so on this way. It just so happens that we start 3 rows with a nitrogen fixer and we start 3 rows with a pear. I had to think that through. Logically, does that make sense? Well, what do you do when you're trying to figure out, does that make sense? I have to project 10 years from now. When these trees have grown up, is that going to be a logical sequence? Having a nitrogen fixer at the beginning of rows isn't kind of the advantage, but it is. Because long term, we're going to want to run a wire overhead, like up in the treetops, to be as the spray. So having a nitrogen fixer at the beginning or a pear, which are the 2 biggest trees, will make sense, because now long term they will act as living posts. So we will run the wire at treetop in them, and so project out 10 years, 15 years. Is that what you'd like? Think of it, is that what you want to have as an end result? And yes, it is what I want as an end result. I just had to think of it on the fly and draw it out to see, does that make sense? So that's the pattern. I'll show you what it looks like. It's such a nice sunset right now too. Look at that. Hey, please subscribe and check out our latest video. When we started, actually we converted from conventional to organic. Oh, you hear that? The goose convention taking off there.